The saddest funeral that I ever presided at as a pastor involved a toddler that had drowned. And it was really extremely difficult. The whole trip to the hospital, the whole thing, it was just really just a tragedy all around. But perhaps what was the most kind of stinging, or the thing that I'll remember, is that the mother and father of this child were not together. And there was a lot of problems that they had both faced in their lives. And so when it came to the funeral expenses, they didn't have enough money. And the father's aunt had a little bit of money that she could help pay for, the food at the reception at the church afterward. But she was withholding payment until they divided up the ashes between the mother and the father. It was just a terrible situation. One of those that you kind of thought about and scratched your head, and you just couldn't make much sense of what had happened here. Today, the disciples offer a haunting question, a question that they're not the only ones that have asked the question. And they say, "Lord, teacher, do you not care that we are perishing? Jesus, do you not care about what we're going through, the challenges we're facing, the storms that we are encountering here in life?" I think again in life we go through these times, we or other people, whether it's some of the extreme stuff that we see on television of refugee camps and war, or whether it's just the kind of the day-to-day stuff that happens between diagnoses and health declines and dementia and cancer and job loss and addiction. And I think all of us at some point in our life have heard a friend or a spouse, a sibling, a parent, a child come to us and say, "Doesn't God care? Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?" What can we say to this? What can we say to this cry that goes on over the centuries? Teacher, do you not care that we're perishing amid the inevitable and strong and scary waves that just come our way in life? I think part of our answer as Christians is to follow the lead of Jesus here, to follow the lead of the one who gives himself for others, who teaches a way of servanthood and love toward our neighbor, and to do whatever we possibly can to calm the storm for other people. If it is at all in our power, we should do what we can to calm the storm for the sake of others. I think it's fair to say that for many right now, one of the ways in which they feel this storm of life beating upon them is the economy. And I sense right now there's kind of two different economies. There's an economy for those who had houses prior to 2020, who had jobs in a combination of stimulus and refinanced houses and high stock market prices mean that things are okay. Then there's another economy for those who just are kind of scraping by, and that fact that blueberries at the grocery store when has gone up means that they're not buying that this week or next week or really for the foreseeable future. Again, there are kind of two economies at work, and for many, they're really feeling overwhelmed by just the stress of kind of where does next month's rent come from? Where does the money come from for groceries? And I think then about all the many different food ministries that our church supports. I think about the food bank. Each week we worship. When we worship, we're sitting on top of thousands of pounds of food that are donated to help those who are in that storm of economic uncertainty. So I think to the extent possible as Christians, we're called, is there a way that we can actually truly help calm the storm for other people? And if so, then we're called to do it. But we all know that in so many situations in life, there's little that we can do. There's little that is at our fingertips, or even with the money in our wallet, or even the will of our heart to really change a situation for somebody. This is clearly the case when it comes to death, but so many other situations, again, we just realize when people come to us and they're lamenting and they're at that sort of existential point of wondering if God cares about them in this world, there's little at those points often that we can do to calm the storm. Jesus today, when the disciples wake him up, he moves. He doesn't have a long conversation, though. He doesn't have a theological debate. He simply speaks to the waves, and he speaks a word of calm. And my sense is that the calm that he gives the storm is the calm that was inside of him. Again, the calm that he gives to the calm was the calm that was inside of Jesus' heart. We live today in a world in which we are always being stimulated, right? There's always a ticker tape, there's always a buzzer, there's always something that's telling us what is going on and what are the problems of this world. I think for many of us there were stretches, long stretches of time, maybe even just while we were at work, where we wouldn't be beladen by all of the crises in our family and in this world. And it's so easy then to live in this world where we're sort of pinballed back and forth from one crisis to another, and just to feel so jacked up all the time, ready to pounce, ready to react, ready, just kind of always on adrenaline. I think here we can learn something from Jesus, that it's actually okay to take a nap. It's okay to rest. It's okay to have a Sabbath. It's okay at every minute not to be 100% plugged into all of the world's problems. In fact, there's a real way in which when we're around somebody who is calm, who has, again, that calm presence, that we ourselves begin to calm down. The power of a non-anxious listener. For most of us, when we're in crisis, we're actually thinking with the reptile part of our brain, right? The back, the fight or flight, a primal, hundreds of millions of year old part of our brain. But what makes us humans, of course, is that ability, that part of the brain up here, that part of our brain that allows us to think through things, to have compassion, to have reason, all those things, again, that make us human. And really often by just being a calm presence around somebody else, we're able not necessarily to stop the waves from coming in their life, but we're able to give them space to be a human again, to take a breath, maybe even to pray, to know that they're not alone. Again, there's such a power that we have in being a non-anxious presence for others. And I think this is something that as Christians in a busy and frenetic world, we're called to cultivate. We're called to cultivate that life of calm, knowing that the one whom we follow is the one who has the power to calm even the wind and the waves. So when we hear the cry of the world, "Do you not care that we are perishing?" I think part of what we're called to do is to just take a breath at that point, to not jump to a ton of answers, but just to listen to people, to listen to their cry of lament and not dial it up anymore. So yes, when the world cries out, "Lord, do you not care that we're perishing?" we're called as Christians sometimes into action and sometimes simply into calm and to prayer. But is that really enough? Is that really enough when people come to us, and really people, and on our own hearts, when we really feel like the data of life just doesn't add up to a God who cares, that there's just too much kind of evil and badness and uncertainty in our lives, and we just kind of can't put it all together anymore? Jesus today, as it turns out, doesn't tell us why the storms arose. He doesn't explain to the disciples all the ways in which somehow there was some purpose or plan or part of this. The disciples get very little. What the disciples do get, though, is another story. A story right after this in which they'll encounter a man who has a storm within, who is possessed by many demons. There'll be another story, too, again, where they're again in a boat, and this time Jesus calls Peter to walk on the water. The whole rest of the Gospels will be one storm after another in the journey in the boat with Jesus. And along the way, they're going to have to learn a bit more who Jesus is. Always wondering, is this truly not just one who has power, but one who cares? The hymn we sang today, When Peace Like a River, has a beautiful story that many of you may know. There was a man named Philip Bliss, and he lived maybe 150 years ago. And after losing a variety of things in a great fire in Chicago in the 1870s, he had actually decided to move to England to support the work of the church over there. He was a lawyer, and he wanted to help the work of an evangelical movement. And there was some last-minute change, and so he just sent his wife and his 4 daughters ahead of him. And it turns out that in those days, ship going across the Atlantic Ocean was dangerous, and there was a terrible storm, and, well, his 4 daughters would die. And his wife sent him a telegram, saved alone. We can imagine the grief of this man, his wife, half a world away, with the news that his 4 daughters had died, his business that he had worked so hard on seemingly in shambles. He eventually, though, was able to get the money, and he finally goes over to England. And when he comes to the spot in the journey where his daughters died, this is where he begins to come up with this hymn, When peace like a river attendeth my way. Right? Though Satan should buffet, though trials and storms come, it is well with my soul. These are not the words of somebody who's lived a life of skittles and rainbows. These are the words of somebody who had seen the water come in their vessel, who had cried out, Lord, do you not care that we are perishing? I'm confident that this life story will move on, and we will be able eventually to see some sort of sense, some sort of beauty, God's presence. But in the moment, it's tough. For the disciples, it would really take until finally they saw that Jesus Christ had died for them. Then they knew that he truly did care for them, that he was with them even until the bitter end. And as he was risen glorious from the tomb, they knew that he was not simply the one who could tell the wind and the waves to stop, but he was the one who had authority even over their sin and over their death. So what can we say to the world? What can we say to ourselves, to our beloved, when they come to us and they say, Lord, is the Lord caring that we're perishing? We'll be tempted, of course, to give nice, round, and easy answers that really don't exist. And we can't really ever address the question of why. We just simply do not know. But what we can tell them that their story will go on. And we can point them not to the why, but to the who, to Jesus, the one who knows what we've been through, the one who is in the boat with us, and the one who has finally gotten out of the boat to go to the cross, to die and to rise for us, to reveal that there's nothing that can separate us from his love. Amen.